This is Judy McGee, the mayor of Clintonville, Wisconsin, reminding you to watch Boomtown on May 12th at 6 p.m. on 36.1.
Clintonville.
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 All seems quiet in this small town 80 miles west of Green Bay. But on March 19th, the residents of Clintonville, Wisconsin were awakened by a series of noises and rattling. March 19th, 2012.
There's like some noises happening. I don't know what the hell it is. Man, it's shaking the whole house. Like somebody's banging like car doors, or I don't know what the heck actually it would be, to tell you the truth.
Okay, can you still hear it now?
No, not right now. I don't hear anything. But then, I don't know, just within the past half hour here, I've heard a couple. I'm trying to pinpoint how far away it is, but I can't tell you, really.
Okay, like fireworks or not? Could it be that?
Yeah, something like that, maybe. I don't know.
The first reports that the city received were at 1:45 a.m., which technically would have been Monday, the 19th. And I actually was sleeping and received a call from the police department that we had unidentifiable at that time exploding, booming, rattling noises coming in a northeast quadrant of the city.
On that day, over 150 complaints were filed with the city of Clintonville.
We have some weird banging going on, and our whole house is shaking.
Been reported in that area. We don't know what it is at this time. That's all I can tell you.
With city officials not being able to identify the noises and booms, many residents and experts had their theory as to what was causing the disturbance. Stephanie Hintz, a reporter for the Clintonville Chronicle, has felt and heard the noises for herself. She has been following the story since day one, and she's heard it all.
Everything from things that are religious-based to underground, bunkers and mining and military operations and conspiracies, and more geological type of scenarios like issues with the water table and freezing and thawing. Is this related to our warmer weather that we've been having most recently? So everything from, extreme differences in opinion to ones that, maybe could possibly make a little bit more sense.
George Stone, a natural science instructor at Milwaukee Area Technical College, thinks it could be related to the warm weather the state had in March and gives us a number of explanations.
When water seeps into the cracks in rocks, and as I say, this can occur down to some depth, and then freezes, it exerts a tremendous pressure, 2,000 pounds per square inch. That's what creates all the potholes in our pavements every spring. It's a result of the freezing and thawing at the beginning and the end of winter of water seeping into cracks and then expanding and forcing the pavement pieces apart. The same thing happens in natural rocks. In fact, it's a very important process of what we call physical or mechanical weathering. The freeze-thaw cycle, ice wedging or frost wedging it's sometimes called. Now this can occur to quite a significant depth. With such unusual warmth, there could have been a sudden thaw which suddenly released the pressure in these fractures and caused boulders to move, or large masses of rock to adjust, to move into the thawed out space, or the space previously occupied by the ice. And this could conceivably cause some rattling and some rumbling and small earthquakes. Another possibility is glacial rebound. That's another geologist in the state suggested that might be the cause. The Earth's crust, the outer part of the Earth's crust and upper mantle behave like a mattress. If you put an extra mass on the surface, it depresses the Earth's crust, and then if we remove that mass, it slowly rebounds. Just as if you put some books on a mattress, the mattress will go down, and then as you take the books off one at a time from a stack of books, the mattress will slowly rebound back to. The Earth's crust behaves the same way. Well, 25,000 years ago, there was a tremendous thickness, several thousand feet of ice over northern Wisconsin at least, and this was an additional mass during the last ice age, during the last glacial stage, and that depressed the Earth's crust. And then when that ice disappeared, finally about 12,000 years ago, when the last ice melted, that extra weight, that extra load on the Earth's crust was removed gradually, and ever since then the Earth's crust has been slowly rebounding. And this is a common phenomenon in areas that have been glaciated. Also in areas that have had large lakes on top of the land, and then the lakes, such as the Great Salt Lake, for example. That was formerly a huge lake that covered much of northern Utah during the ice ages, and when the climate changed and the water evaporated, the land rebounded, and the old shorelines out there on the mountainside are warped by the rebound. So this rebound, it's called isostatic rebound, iso meaning same and static meaning standing. The Earth's crust does tend to rebound when a mass is removed. And so that's a long, slow process, and conceivably this could be part of that. And I tend to think there is a sort of a myth or a legend up there near Clintonville of a fault zone for which there's no geologic evidence as far as I'm aware. I think this is likely to be a non-tectonic cause, probably due to movements in the rocks underneath Clintonville in that area. And it is covered. It does have unconsolidated sediment cover, glacial deposits. There are gravel quarries up there, but there's bedrock down underneath. And the vibrations are probably caused by movements within the bedrock, but I think it's more likely that they are due to non-tectonic causes, not plate movements, but something more localized. And the fact that they went on for quite a long period, and the fact that they followed this record-breaking warm period, to me that's very significant. The timing is very significant. So I think in some way it's related to the thawing out of the subsurface, because ordinarily ice that forms over the months of the winter forms down as far as there is water in the cracks, and it can be quite, tens of feet deep, the frozen zone. And a warm period, a prolonged warm period, not just one day, but a period of 8 to 10 days, a prolonged warm period could cause the thawing to penetrate to some depth and allow for adjustments of the rocks, whether it's rebound, the stress being released because of lubrication by meltwater, or whether it's just due to the relief of pressure, removal of the wedges, the ice wedges in the cracks causing adjustments. I'm not sure what the relative contributions of those causes would be, but I'm confident that it's related to the warm period. Otherwise, you have this extremely unusual, they never have had this, as far as anybody knows up in Clintonville. This never happened before. And we've never had such a prolonged warm period before either. And to me, that coincidence means something.
With so many questions still left unanswered, many residents were left on edge.
House was shaking, the windows were shaking, it was quite loud.
Sounded like somebody was dropping bombs. House vibrated, the windows rattled, and it even shook the bed.
Even my neighbors, they come running out of the house, they packed up and left.
The first 4 days were incredibly difficult to have people looking to you as a local government official to have answers. And when you don't have answers, that's more difficult than even just dealing with something that you know. Even if it had been worse, at least people would understand and know what it was. And obviously in Wisconsin, we might be more used to dealing with things like a tornado or an ice storm in the wintertime, things like that, where you have some sort of what you might qualify as a disaster or an emergency event, but you have answers. It may take time to clean up, to recover, but you have answers. And that was what was very challenging those first 4 days. I think there's a lot of people that believe the data that we've presented from the USGS, and there are certainly plenty of people that are skeptical about it because the experiences that we're having here are so different than those in places that are more used to having earthquakes in places like, say, California.
Nick Montez, a California native now living in Milwaukee, was in Clintonville during the booms and sensed a feeling of uncertainty.
I kind of did feel a sense of uncertainty, just even from my own personal experience being in Clintonville, just because I have felt a quake. I know these people have never felt a quake, and so they didn't know if what these booms were, if it was quake related and so forth. And I think for me, personally speaking, because I have felt quakes, I know quakes don't boom days before and after an actual quake has struck. So for me, I was just kind of uncertain if this was a quake. And again, it ties back to what the city administrator said, is that seismologists have told her that the sediment or the rock is different here in the Midwest than it would be back on the West Coast. And so what they may be experiencing here is completely different than what I experienced back on the West Coast. And again, I'm not a seismologist, so it's hard for me to say whether or not these are quakes, but just going from what I know, it's out of the ordinary to hear booms, I think, before and after a quake.
Melissa Miller, who grew up in Clintonville, still has family there and was in contact with them.
You know, I did plan a weekend up at my parents', coincidentally the same weekend after it all started and began. While the time I spent up there, I did not personally feel or witness or any of the sensations or earthquakes, but there's certainly the buzz around town. No, they were concerned because they didn't know exactly what the noises were, what they were coming from. But as far as them personally being worried or totally scared out of their wits, no, that wasn't the case. There was one day my mom was a little, thinking back, wondering what she may have felt or heard part of the rumbling. She said, I felt like a large truck drove by the house, but they don't live in a place where large trucks drive, so.
I heard it and I felt it inside my home. And we also did hear a series of booms also in the office on that Monday morning. I actually felt a rolling motion underneath my feet, under my home. It sounded like a distant reverberating shotgun, and it felt kind of like a shiatsu massager underneath my house.
I think that most people's belief would have been that it was some sort of natural gas. When you hear exploding and think about things like that in the Midwest, I think that you would have guessed that it was an elevated level of gas underground in some sort of piping.
The disturbance continued off and on for a number of days. Clintonville city officials reportedly received more than 600 complaints from March 19th through April 2nd. And that got the attention of not just Clintonville residents, but the rest of the world.
Round 3 of more shakes and booms in Clintonville.
Breaking news now. It appears those booms that had folks in Clintonville rattled have returned.
Neighbors in Clintonville say they're scared to go to sleep tonight.
Tonight in Clintonville, the city is trying to record the noises that have roused residents from bed in the past few days.
It has happened again. An early morning wake-up call for people in Waupaca County town of Clintonville.
And it's safe to say that Clintonville hasn't received this much attention in a long time.
There has been in the last year some things going on around town that have drawn more attention, but in my experience, I've been in Clintonville probably about 14 years. This is probably the largest thing.
Well, I was born and raised in Clintonville and then moved, elsewhere once I hit college, so. Clintonville gets little spots in the spotlight every now and then. I don't recall anything this big or this significant.
City Administrator Lisa Kuss has been giving interviews nonstop.
I would guess it's got to be somewhere over 100 by now if you take all the different local TV stations. Obviously local here for Clintonville would be Green Bay and Wausau, expanded out to Milwaukee and Madison. And then at about day 3 and 4, we got a lot of national attention from CNN, The Today Show, Good Morning America, and radio stations all over the country and in Canada, England, lots of different places. I've been kidding with the people from USGS and from Michigan Tech that I've received my minor in geology in 2 weeks.
1 week after the booming and vibrations began shaking Clintonville, residents were finally able to get some answers.
Through the last 2 weeks, this is day 12 now, we have done lots of things obviously in the beginning to eliminate things off the list. We then became aware from the USGS, which is the United States Geological Survey, who monitors earthquakes throughout the entire country, that they were able to confirm on the second day that there was a 1.5 magnitude earthquake.
But an earthquake in Wisconsin? That's pretty rare, and some people found it hard to believe.
No, I could never imagine it, but I did learn that wherever there is rock, there are faults. whether they are a few 100 feet long or whether they are deeper or longer. So wherever there is rock for bedrock, there will be cracks, there will be faults. And at some point in time, those cracks and faults may shift and they may move. So if you're living in an area that has that type of rock underneath, it is a possibility to experience minor earthquakes.
On the west side, on the west coast, we're used to quakes. People know what a quake feels like. We know what it sounds like. And I think here, for me, was just, I was part of the mystery. I guess I was involved just as much as, the residents here is in terms of wondering, if these are quakes, because, I've never experienced a quake here in the Midwest because I'm new to the Midwest. And from what the city manager or the city administrator told me from Clintonville, that the sediment here, the rock, is different in the Midwest than it would be to the West Coast. So, of course, if there was a quake, it would sound different, it would rumble different, and it would feel different to residents there. So I think that was kind of the mystery of it, and that's what kind of got me involved, or a little more, I guess, personally involved, because, I don't want to say I enjoy earthquakes, but because I have experience in feeling them and dealing with them, I think that's probably what caught my interest. So
when a big truck goes by on the street outside, there are vibrations and you can feel the windows rattle, or when a train goes by. Are those earthquakes? I mean, it's vibrations caused by something, but very, very low magnitude compared to tectonic earthquakes.
I don't think that anyone in Wisconsin, let alone Clintonville or anywhere else, and probably even the entire Midwest, would guess that people waking up in the middle of the night from such loud, exploding, booming type noises would have ever been an earthquake. Obviously, we don't have earthquakes commonly. The last one, now that we have learned a lot, was in 1947, and so I don't think that anybody would have woke up there on March 19th to believe that Clintonville, Wisconsin would be experiencing earthquakes.
Harold Tobin, a professor of geoscience at UW-Madison, agrees that this is a strange occurrence.
Well, Wisconsin is about the most seismically quiet place in the whole country. In fact, we've never had an earthquake that was in the official USGS sort of catalog of earthquakes recorded before this whole series of events that happened in Clintonville. So that's pretty interesting. Surrounding states have earthquakes occasionally, pretty small, but we haven't even seen any. One thing that's been different is that there actually are seismic stations in Wisconsin for the first time, really, in any significant number, just in the past year or so, with this thing called the US Array. So what the USGS found was, in looking at the data that comes from these seismic stations really closely, that some very, very small signals were recorded that show that at least one of those events was an earthquake, just at a magnitude that normally we don't even expect people to feel, or much less hear, like people talked about hearing the rattling and the rumbling. I think what happened is there actually was a whole series of earthquakes, and that what the USGS initially identified was just one of the events, but actually each time people were woken up in the night or felt those booms, each one of those was an individual earthquake, just right down there, barely at the level of detection of the instruments. I don't really see any evidence that it's anything else going on up there. In particular, I don't see any sign that something like pumping of groundwater or big changes. People talked about the change in the spring temperature being a factor, but that just doesn't get any kind of penetration down into the ground. So I think they're earthquakes. I really don't think that there's any chance of a sinkhole opening up there. Yeah, the kind of rock is just wrong for making that. Sinkholes usually develop in places where we have limestone that makes caves and caverns, and this granite bedrock up there is just not the right stuff for it. Well, in some ways, an earthquake's an earthquake, and they all involve basically the breaking of rock along a fracture down deep in the earth. But there are some differences in the earthquakes that we seem to be having here in Clintonville with ones that are more typical for, like, California. One difference is the rock here is very, very hard, very rigid. It's crystalline, granitic bedrock, and it comes very close to the surface of the earth. The soil layers aren't too thick on top of it. And what that means is that probably these are very shallow earthquakes. To a seismologist, shallow means maybe just a few hundred meters or 1 kilometer or something, less than a mile below the surface of the earth. California earthquakes typically are several miles or even 10 or more miles down. And so they're felt very differently, more the long, slow shaking, whereas we had sort of the sharp crack of these real shallow earthquakes here.
Up until March 24th, no one was able to record the noises coming from Clintonville until Brian Sullivan a Madison area technical student was able to pick up the sound.
I was in contact with the Clintonville police dispatch, and they would relay the reports to me, and occasionally I would go out to the location, just drive past the house, and sometimes the people that reported the booms were still up outside, kind of looking around or talking to people, and I would I'd confront them, told them what I was doing, and just try to get a brief description of what happened. And in between those reports that I would go out to, I was in the front yard of the city electrical utility building. I had my two different microphones set up and recording equipment, just sitting there waiting for something to happen. And then at 3:59 a.m., I finally captured a boom. You would think that today, with everybody's cell phones, that it wouldn't be too difficult to try to capture this thing, but in fact, it happens so quickly that unless you're recording 24 hours a day, it's impossible to whip out your phone and hit record.
Here is the actual recording taken from Brian. Listen closely at the 5-second mark. Here it is one more time along with a graph. So what's being done about the disturbance now?
Michigan Tech University has brought 4 seismometers to our community so that if activity continues, that we're able to better monitor and get more accurate data regarding those events.
We have 4 seismometers, 4 seismic sensors, and we have 8 low-frequency microphones. We looked at the data the second day after we put them out, so we picked up the data and looked at it actually on the way home up to Michigan. And we saw one earthquake that had happened while we were actually there, with booms reported to the town. Another unusual aspect is that earthquakes are typically felt but not heard. But in this case, there were some that were actually heard but not felt. We didn't really expect it was anything different than an earthquake, but we weren't really sure. And I guess we're still not sure what's causing these earthquakes, what is in the geologic structure that would cause these things to happen.
The experts seem to agree that the residents of Clintonville are not in any kind of danger.
I think they're not in danger, that it's not due to any major earth processes such as movement along a fault or major tectonic forces, or certainly not due to imminent volcanic activity or anything like that. There's no evidence of that.
The people in Clintonville, I don't think really need to worry that this is leading up to a much larger earthquake, like a really damaging California-style earthquake. That's not to say they might not see more of these small rattlers and maybe even a little bit bigger one. And it's good for people to just be aware of simple precautions like duck and cover if you start to feel shaking and it doesn't stop right away.